A word of warning, this podcast explores graphic and disturbing stories and includes some strong language. It therefore may not be suitable for our young listeners or other folks who may find it disturbing. Hello and welcome to True Crime Daily's My Favorite Case. I'm your host, Ana Garcia, and everyone in the world of true crime has a story to tell about a case they worked or a case that they lived through. Some are high profile, some you've never heard of, but they are all fascinating. Our guest today has many stories to tell. He is a former FBI profiler, John Douglas, who is also a prolific writer and a New York Times best-selling author many times over. John, we're so excited to have you on the program. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Anna.
Oh, this is great that we have so much to talk about. You know, for those of you, many of you probably know who John is, but for those of you who may not, John is often referred to as the founding father of criminal profiling. I mean, that's amazing that his protocols are used to this day to identify the characteristics of the criminal that is being hunted. And also, John has been the inspiration for the characters in Silence of the Lambs and Criminal Minds and now Mindhunter. So you've inspired many characters from your true life experiences. You've also, John, interviewed some of the most notorious killers and serial killers of our lifetime. It's just, and you managed to sit there with a smile on your face, which is amazing.
Yeah, but there were times in my life where it was rough, and any of your fans here too who followed me know I nearly died in 1983 on the Green River murder case. I collapsed in my hotel room. I felt even before I went out on that trip that something was going to happen to me. I was training a couple of hundred New York City cops, and during my presentation, I was just all over the country. I didn't know where I was half the time, then out of the country. And I thought I was having a heart attack. And what it was an anxiety attack. And I'm saying to myself, John, you got to regroup. And I did. And probably no one even detected anything. But I knew when I went back to Quantico that I have to take out more life insurance, income protection. I'm only 38 years of age. I'm working, at any given time, 50 to 100 cases. In my career, I've done over 5,000 cases, both directly and supervised and agents, working with me. But when I went out to Seattle, I had a tremendous headache. And what happened is that I had two agents I had to break in and show them the ropes on how you go about doing this, how do you go before a task force. I said goodbye to my wife 2 times that day, once at home, once at school. And she said, "Why are you telling me this? You don't look well." And I said, "I got this pain in my side of my head, but I have to go out there. I have to break these people in." So I go out, feel like I'm getting flu-like symptoms, and I go before the task force. And then I tell the 2 agents when I get back to the hotel, "Hey, look, I'm going to have to stay in bed here for a couple of days. I'll see you Friday." It's now Tuesday. I put the not disturb sign on my door. And that night, I collapsed on my hotel room floor, and my God, no one disturbs me now for the next 3 days.
No! Oh no!
Yeah. So what happened is that when they kicked down the door, they find me in a coma. I'm in a frog-like position, and when they take me to ER, what they found, the right side of my brain had split. I had 104 to 107 degree body temperature, causing me to go into a coma, causing me to be paralyzed. And I was in that coma for a week, came out of it paralyzed, and had to go through all this rehab, 5 months of rehab. The Bureau was going to give me a disability. I didn't want a disability. And I was like I said, I was 38. And so I went through all of that. When I'm out of work 5 or 6 months, I go back to work. Cases are piling up. They give me help now. But it takes about 2 years to train somebody in this. And it takes about 5 years to make it pretty good. But by then, usually they start getting burned out and they want to do something else. So here comes the cases. I have all these cases, including this case that I wrote about when a killer calls. And I don't know, Anna, if I still have it with me. I don't know if I got it in me because my brain had been fried to a crisp. And so there's brain damage. And the Bureau is calling me. I'm in a hospital a month in Seattle, Washington. And the directors and the assistant directors are calling, and I could hardly talk. I was just taken off a life support system, and I said, "I don't think I'll be able to use my left hand anymore." I was paralyzed on that side, And they said, all we want, John, is your brain. We just want your brain. So, but
Oh my God.
this is what I'm thinking. The brain is gone too, man. The brain is gone. Little do they know. So so I go back, and I'm just very emotional. I can't even watch a Lassie movie. And then when I was in that coma, I thought I was in hell. They had a body before them in this ER with doll-like eyes that were not blinking. My digestive system shut down. And as far as they know, and they told my family, if he comes out of it, he's going to be in a vegetative state. But what I felt like, I thought I was in hell, and I thought I was being murdered. And the reason for that is that to the doctors and the nurses, I had no reaction to all the IVs they were putting into me. And when they put the life support system down my throat, I thought someone was going to kill me. Someone's trying to kill me now, because it's all this silence. But they don't see me, struggling. And so all of a sudden I hear this voice, and it's a nurse saying, "John, you're very sick. You're a Swedish hospital in Seattle, Washington. And we're going to make you well. We're going to make you better." And hearing that voice, they didn't see a change, but to me, I just relaxed internally, and everything went dark. And then when I woke up a week later, then I see I'm paralyzed. Where am I? I can't talk, because they just put out the life support system. So I was a basket case, and I was kind of angry at the FBI because I've been trying to get help, and I couldn't keep this pace up. I'm traveling a third of the year. I don't even know where I am half the time when I wake up.
So you're recovering from this horrific health crisis caused by the level of stress that you're dealing with. And that will give everyone, this is the backdrop in which John now enters this horrific case. And this is the inspiration for this book, When a Killer Calls. This is a case that has haunted you forever. And the case goes back to May 31st of 1985, when a young woman named Sherry Smith was abducted from her driveway in South Carolina just 2 days before her high school graduation. The abduction rocked her small town, triggered a massive manhunt. And that's when the FBI was brought in. And here you are, John, recovering, and you're questioning yourself, like, do I still have it? Even though you're like the guy, and you've got her family depending on you to figure out where the daughter is and who took the daughter.
Right. Initially, what happens, Anna, is that the sheriff and the undersheriff come to the FBI Academy. They're National Academy graduates, meaning they attended an 11-week course, and they picked up. That's where they learned about this new investigative techniques, criminal profiling, crime analysis, whatever you want to call it. So they come and they give us the case materials on the one victim, Sherry Faye Smith, and from that we can tell from the recordings and from the modus operandi that we're not dealing with a kid here. We're dealing with a criminally sophisticated, we say organized offender, where it's premeditated. There's very little evidence left behind initially, but just the boldness of him abducting this first victim from the mailbox as her house sits back about 200 yards from the road. And the father's looking out the window, and he sees his daughter pull alongside of the mailbox and gets out, getting the mail. He walks out of the office. He comes back 5 minutes later. The car is still there. He goes down to the mailbox, and then he sees that the car is still running. Her purse is on the seat, which is critical because in that purse, she is a diabetic, a form of diabetes that if she doesn't have this prescription, she requires a gallon of water an hour if she doesn't take that prescription here. So that is the backdrop. So from this, and from the information and some of the tapes, this guy is calling the victims up and claiming responsibility for the crime. He's using some kind of device to change the pitch and tone of his voice. So we're gathering all this information, and really it's a lot of information. You don't usually have the guy's voice. And we know the modus operandi, but we don't know why. So
Sherry's 17 years old, and the abductor is bold enough to call her family, correct? And right. Starts a dialogue with them, which is like the most frightening thing. I don't know which is worse, hearing from the abductor or not.
Yeah, I never had a case. I mean, I've interviewed like Dennis Rader, the BTK Strangler, did a book on him. He called the police. He called the newspaper media. Interviewed David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, in New York City. He contacted Detective Joe Borelli, Jimmy Breslin. We had the Zodiac. He's made contacts too, but never where a guy now is taunting, giving them really false hope that the daughter is still alive. So he makes those calls, and then what happens 2 days later, he said, I'm going to be sending you a letter. This letter's coming from your daughter, and in about 2 days. And so we rush down to the post office, we retrieve the letter, and in the letter, it's titled Last Will and Testament. And up in the left-hand corner of the letter, the time is 3:10. We believe that's the time after she writes this letter, she's going to be murdered. But in the letter, she's saying, I want a closed casket. I miss you, mommy and daddy. I love you, Robert, her brother, and Richard, her boyfriend. And it's a goodbye, letter here. He waits a couple of days now, and then he makes another call to the family. And now Dawn, the other daughter, is getting involved in these telephone calls. And she's a couple of years older and looks just like her younger sister. And what he now provides is directions where we can find the body. And you can tell, and this was part of the profile, he was following a script. He's obsessive compulsive. And if you ask a question, it throws him off because he has it all scripted out.
Ah, interesting.
And then the reason why he waits a few days, Anna, is because from my experience here, and it was 100 degrees when we were down there, he wants decomposition of the body. He wants advanced stages of decomposition. So it'll be difficult for the ME to determine method and cause of death. And it'll be difficult to determine even if the victim was sexually assaulted, difficult retrieving forensic, evidence. So sure enough, he gives us this obsessive compulsive directions to the location where we can find her. He then stops calling. And then all of a sudden, there's another 10 days later. There's another abduction of a 9-year-old girl named Deborah Helmick, and he will later call the family, the first family, and say that he is responsible. So we have this abduction of this girl, and then he will then call up in the first family and give directions to Dawn, to the victim's sister, where we can find that body.
If you struggle to figure out what to make for dinner each night, it might be time to check out HelloFresh. HelloFresh delivers pre-portioned ingredients to your door, including farm fresh produce that arrives within a week, so you can get the convenience without skimping on the quality. Skip those trips to the grocery store and say goodbye to those long lines. HelloFresh offers the flexibility that you need to easily customize your order online or in the app. You can change your delivery day, your food preferences, the plan size, or you can even skip a week whenever you need to. And HelloFresh is 72% cheaper than a restaurant meal of the same quality. And I have to tell you that I've always been really impressed with the produce. As you know, it can be a struggle these days to find really fresh produce. And I can tell you, it's like the stuff had just been picked, what they sent in my box. Really impressive. So go to HelloFresh.com/TCD16 and use code TCD for True Crime Daily 16 for up to 16 free meals and 3 free gifts. That's HelloFresh.com/TCD16. Don't forget to use the code TCD16 for up to 16 free meals and the 3 free gifts. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Angies List is now Angie, your home for everything home. And as any homeowner knows, caring for the place where you live can take, a lot of care. Luckily, Angie doesn't just have 20 plus years of home service experience. They've combined it with new tools to simplify how we tackle home care. Just bring them your project online or with the Angie app. Answer a few questions, and Angie will handle the rest from start to finish, or let you compare quotes from local pros and connect instantly, which means you can cross things off your to-do list in just a few taps. And when you book and pay through Angie, you get their happiness guarantee, covering your project up to the full purchase price. So whether it's routine maintenance or a dream remodel, Angie makes it easy to get the job done. Let's start the year and your next project off right. Download the free Angie mobile app today or visit Angie.com. That's Angie, ANGI.com. So right. Dawn, who is Sherry's sister here, I mean, it's like a further traumatization, really. I mean, they're being traumatized all over again. Now, at this point in the case, John, when he has abducted the second girl and he is calling the family of the first girl, have you now found Sherry's body at this point? Yes. Was he accurate?
Yes. Yeah, he was very right down. So, and we found it in the research too. The killers would go back to the scenes of the crime for different reasons, to fantasize, relive the crimes. Ted Bundy did it. He was involved in necrophilia with his victims. So he went back and he measured distances that he provides. Same thing with the second victim. Now with the second victim, and now I'm brought down because now we have a serial killer here. He's going to kill again. So by the time I get down there, and I get down to South Carolina, I want to meet the family, the cops. I'm going to be going through everything. And the sheriff tells me, Sheriff Jim Ness, he said, John, he stopped calling. He stopped calling. And so I tell him, I'll get him to call. I'll get him to call.
How did you get him to call?
I said, well, let me go meet the family. So I go over and I meet the entire family, which is heartbreaking, very religious family. It just crushes you to see them and deal with them. And I meet Dawn because I'm sensing things that I'm not going to be initially telling him out loud, but I can see the killer is focusing on Dawn. He stopped calling. I'm thinking of using Dawn now as bait. I'm going to use her as bait. So I get Dawn. I said, Dawn, show me Sherry's bedroom, please. We go to Sherry's bedroom and I see she collects koala bears. And so I'm looking at the koala bears and I'm thinking ahead now. And I'm thinking of how I can draw him out. And it's going to be through a memorial service. I'm going to have a memorial service for this victim. And I find a little koala bear about, so big, where you pinch the shoulders and the arms open up. It's hanging on a string. Yeah. And I take that. I go back into the living room and the family and the cops are there. And I said, Miss Smith, there's something I wanted to do. And I kind of hemming and hawing. And he said, John, what is it? What? I said, this killer here, he is focusing on your daughter, but I think I can get him to call again. We got to get him to call. I want to show Dawn how to keep him on the telephone using hostage negotiation and techniques. But so as I'm telling him this, he said, but John, what if he's going to come here and kill my daughter? He had an obvious concern. I lost one daughter. Now I may lose another daughter. And I said, based upon this particular type of offender we're dealing with, this inadequate nobody, he's not the type that's going to be driving up in the driveway here. And your daughter will have 24-hour protection with that daughter. But I want to have this memorial service, Mr. Smith, with the family. I want to meet with an investigative reporter. I tell Sheriff Metz, because I want a story to be written. Because I know the killer from my research follows the press. I want to manipulate his behavior and I want him to go to that memorial service. So I tell him what to do, how to come up with a podium. We're going to paint white. We're going to have the picture of Sherry Faye Smith laminated on top of this podium. Dawn is going to place the koala bear on a flower at the scene, and we're going to stake it out. The problem was, only from an investigative perspective, is that she was buried very close to the road, very, very, very close. It would have been better had she been back, but we can't change that back in the cemetery. So we will then stake this out. This will not be the way he will become apprehended, but if we didn't catch him this other way, we would have got him this way. Because she was very close to the road, we were jotting down plates. And we got his plate. In retrospect, we got, and all we had to do. But
you didn't know it at the time that you had his plate.
No, we didn't know. We didn't know it. I was hoping. I knew he would do something like this because the ego of him and the calls, to the families. So we would have found out that this guy Larry Gene Bell, had this criminal history of like the profile, the abductions. He went to prison for 5 years. Abducted a girl. He He was sending obscene telephone calls to a 9-year-old girl many years ago. He was divorced. He's white. We also said he had an electronic background, electricity. He had that. He had that in his background as well.
He was an electrician as a trade, correct?
Electrician. But how he got caught? Now, should I tell you? Listen, what the heck? Publisher won't like it. What the this? So what? How? When the last will and testament was written, it was written on a legal pad, and your viewers and listeners know that if you write on a pad, just because you write here and you rip it off underneath, there could be some indented writing.
Right, from the previous page.
Right. Even if there's several pages, there's a machine that can pick up indented writing that's way down, deep in that. And so this was sent off to the lab, the GBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and they come back and they see that what they found was a shopping list with grocery lists, but also there was a telephone number, and on the
partial number, right? It was a partial number,
but really good, missing just one digit. The prefix took us to Alabama, the area code. The prefix then took us to Huntsville, Alabama, and then the next 4 digits, all but one digit was missing. So through the process of elimination, boom, we get a number, takes us back to Columbia, South Carolina, where this crime takes place. And so they're all excited. The cops are excited. There's a guy named Ellis, the Shepherd family, Ellis Shepherd. And they go knocking on his door, thinking this is the guy. And the guy comes to the door. He doesn't fit the profile, the Douglas profile. He's a middle-aged guy, and he's got this house. His wife is there and everything. So they invite him in, and they said, let me just tell you something. We've had this crime. We've had this crime here. And he said, oh, with the 2 victims? Oh, yeah. How do you know about it? Well, we were away for 6 weeks. Larry Gene Bell, who will be the suspect, was staying at our house. He was house sitting for us. But when we came back after 6 weeks, his appearance had changed, and that was in our profile too. He lost all kinds of weight. He didn't have a beard. He grew out a beard, and he had newspaper clippings of the crime. So that's another thing, a part of the profile.
Wow.
Yeah, the clippings, of this, and so they gave the age and everything of our profile, and the husband and wife are looking at each other. And oh, by the way, here's a tape. Listen to the tape on some of the tapes. So they played some of the tapes of the subject calling the first victim's family, the Smith family, and they look at each other. It's Larry Gene Bell. Well, who is he? He's an electrician, helper. He helps me as an electrician, helper for me. He's been house sitting for 6 days. And can we look around here? Can we look around in the room? And they find his bedroom. The first thing they find is that his gun was misplaced. He gave him a gun, for protection. He lived in a rural area. It was misplaced, but it was fired once, and he never fired it, Mr. Shepherd. Also, they looking through the mattress, and under the mattress, there's a bondage magazine of a woman in a crucifix. And this case will involve this bondage in a way through suffocation. Actually, the victim. That's how she's going to die. So we do all this. The rest is going to be made. So,
How was Sherry killed, and then how was the little girl killed? And did you find her body?
The medical examiner, when we went over the crime with the medical examiner here, she died of suffocation, as well as the second. And how we know that, there was still duct tape residue on the face. But you see, he's criminally sophisticated enough to know to remove the duct tape, so we wouldn't have any fingerprints on the duct tape. And we could tell too it was around her head because her hair was cut to remove the duct tape. Could not tell whether or not she was sexually assaulted, but he's telling us in his communications that he made love, or his audio tapes, he made love, to Sherry, and I'm sure he sexually assaulted the second victim.
Horrible. So we have 2 girls who have been murdered. You have now identified who you think is the killer based on a partial phone number that left an imprint on the letter that was sent to the victim's family, which is unbelievable. This memorial that you set up, really, you find out later that you drew him out. He went there. He went to the memorial. You got his license plate.
We got it. If we didn't get him this other way, we definitely would have got him, this way here. So now we have a name, and now what's next? The next is going to be an interrogation, right?
How was this guy arrested? How'd you get him?
Arrested. There was another thing. He was living with his mother and father, just waiting.
Oh my God! Right? How typical is that?
I tried. He was 30. Like he's 35 years of age, and as he came out of the house, they got him. Right there, and he made a comment. You're probably stopped me because of those two girls that were missing or died. I don't think he said died, so were missing, and so they bring him there back to the sheriff's department. But what I had them do is, I became developing like a scene set. I created a task force building a room that never didn't exist. And they had a trailer out back that they got in a drug deal. And they made that a task force room with signs on the outside, task force, crime task force. And when he went in there, had it arranged. So when he walked in there, he saw pictures of himself, his residence, where he lives, arrows pointing to the abduction sites of the victims, arrows then pointing to the Shepherds where he was staying the weekend, files with his name outside the victims, just to show that this has been one thorough and hell of an investigation. So they were out there. I'm waiting now. I coached the guys, but I'm waiting back in the undersheriff's office and waiting throughout the day, and they're not getting anywhere, on this with this guy, because what you realize that when you do these interviews is, how am I going to get this guy to confess to me when they got the death penalty? Number one, they got the death penalty in South Carolina. And number two, he's a child killer. And he's also like crazy. Yeah. Well, he's crazy, but he knows right from wrong. He's sane. He knows the nature and consequences of his actions. He will play crazy, though. That's what, and I want him to play crazy. I just want to get him to admit to something. So I'm waiting I had another agent with me, Ron Walker. All of a sudden, they call them solicitors down in South Carolina. The solicitor and the sheriff come in, and they bring him in where I am, and typical South Carolina. He says, "You know who these boys are here? These boys are from the FBI. The FBI. And that guy there, John Douglas, he did a profile that fits you to a T, Larry. Fits you to a T. And we're going to leave you with these boys here." So they walk out, and they walk out. I'm not prepared for this. And it was kind of weird because when I got the call, we had this guy. It was like about 2 a.m. at a Mensa cheap hotel, South Carolina. And I put on this white outfit, like a white shirt, and it was white slacks. And almost looked clinical. And it was, in retrospect, that's kind of good. It didn't look FBI-ish, looked clinical. So they bring him into me, and I had no plans for this. Okay, take a seat. So he sits down on a couch. I sit down on a chair just in front of him, but not. I want to have a conversation. I don't want to have an interrogation. I don't want to have an interview. I want to have a conversation. I want him to know about me as much as him. So I start talking to him about me, about the research I've done, going to prisons. I've done interviews that really have helped me to understand, people who perpetrate, these crimes. And what they told me, Larry, is that there was almost sometimes two sides of their personality, almost like a good and the bad. And when they perpetrate the crime, the next day or right after that, they see what they've done and they can't believe it. It's like, what did I do? What happened? I don't understand. It's like the good and the bad Larry Gene Bell. When did you first start feeling bad about this crime? See, so I segue into that. And he says, at the memorial service, I read about it, and then I went to the memorial service. So I went by. So he's not admitting he did it. Yeah, he's not. And I said, Larry, what do you think? Could you have done something like this? And he said, Mr. Douglas, he said, the good Larry Gene Bell sitting here, they couldn't have done this, but the bad Larry Gene Bell, could have. And that would be the furthest we could get, for the confession. And I'll end up testifying in court. His goose was cooked, testifying in court. And it went before the jurors, and it took less than an hour to convict him. But he acted crazy in the courtroom. He has to, because he's going to get the death penalty. So he's trying to act crazy. He's nuts and everything. But it was interesting, as you're watching him. I was there during the trial. he's taken notes just like he did. He's obsessive compulsive, like the notes and script he wrote for that he read, to the families, when he called them. But this, what I loved about the case, and it was a great case of law enforcement coming together, and you didn't always see that in the 80s, and particularly in the 70s, you didn't see it. And the Bureau was often criticized for dominating, taking cases. And my program is to help police, help law enforcement. And the Bureau is really going to be the last ones to embrace me. It was primarily local police. And by the time when I retired, we were doing 1,000 cases, a year.
Wow. Hey, John, so I have a question then. So he didn't confess, although he was being a little cagey there. What is the evidence which was used in order to convict him? Like how strong, what was the strongest evidence? Was there DNA back then?
No, but the victim's hair. The victim's hair was found. Not only her hair was found in the shepherd's house where he was staying, but also in his own. He carried the hair over to his own house where he was living with his parents. The audio tapes are, because he didn't use the electronic device throughout all the tapes. What happens is they start getting confident. It's like Dennis Rader, the BTK Strangler. They're untouchable, and they get sloppy, they get careless. And unfortunately for law enforcement, we have to wait for that moment when they do get sloppy and careless. So there was just a mountain of evidence, and the shepherds, they testified of him and his appearance and what they found, and keeping the newspaper clippings and the weight he lost. And so his goose was cooked. So he received the death penalty. Then he was on death row for like 10 years. And so I think one thing that surprised me is that rather than take lethal injection, he took the electric chair because he's such a coward. But I think what it is because he is so low on the totem pole in the prison hierarchy, low, and the guards hate you, the inmates despise you, you coward, you weakling, and everything. I think just as a last, hurrah, you want to show how tough he is, and so he took the electric chair, the tough way, to be executed.
Well, I was just thinking he was an electrician, so I kind of saw the synergy there.
Yeah, that's right. I never thought of that. Yeah.
I love that. I was able to share a clue with the great John Douglas. My! It's a new high for me. That's what I was thinking. That was the synergy there with his affinity to it. Now, what I find interesting, you talked about how there was this bondage magazine or photo under his mattress. One of the things that he went on and on about in court and also while on death row was screaming that he was Jesus Christ, screaming that the Mona Lisa was really a man. All his outbursts. In fact, I read that while he was on death row, he drove the other inmates insane because of his consistent screaming that was driving everybody else crazy.
Well, that'll make you crazy just being in prison, death row for a period of time. But it's still, he had all these appeals. He had appeal. So he's hoping that one of these appeals are going to go, come through for him, which they did not. But that was predicted. I predicted that to Donnie Myers was a prosecutor, solicitor down there, and that this would happen the first day. And sure enough, that happened the very, very first day. See, that's another thing we add. A lot of people think all we do are serial murder cases or just profiling. No, it's just there's so much that we offer to the victims of the crimes, to prosecutors on cross-examination strategies. That was big for me in the Atlanta child killings with Wayne Williams. I coached the prosecution, did the profile, but also coached the prosecution. And they use you for probable cause and search warrant, not the profile. It should never be used, that profile, because there's too many variables and it could fit people, have nothing to do with anything. But where I have been able to testify is linkage, where whoever did these series of rapes, it's my opinion, say there's 10 of them, that's certainly I can link these 5 here, these cases here. How can you do that, Mr. Douglas, based on the verbal, the sexual, and the physical assault, of the victim and the geographics of where they took place? So you can testify to that. And sometimes prosecutors want to get you in there profiling. No. And unfortunately, there's been some agents who have done that and had cases reversed, and there's even been some wrongful convictions I've seen. So you never should testify to that. You again, you're a coach, and it's the police case. You're trying to help them.
So, John, I'm curious, now that, technology has changed so significantly, and now we're seeing the use of DNA technology to solve all these old cold cases or identify victims who have never been identified, murder victims. I'm curious as to whether you see a shift in criminal investigation that maybe is heavier on, let's say, DNA and forensics, because that has become the gold standard, versus what you do with the profiling. Like, I'm just wondering what's happening.
Now, hopefully you do have the forensics. You always hope there's the forensics, but there's still a lot of cases. People ask me how many serial killers. I just say serial killers are there, and I've always said, going way back in the late 70s, and at least 35 to 50 over the years. And now I'm meeting people saying, well, we don't hear about these cases. I mean, I think it's kind of numbed us, unless there's something really outrageous about them. Mm-hmm. But there was a group that has done a murder accountability program called MAP, and they estimate that right now that they could be as many as 2,000 serial killers in the United States. Oh my God! The Bureau, used to be 3 or more killings with a period in between each of the killings. There's a time fact. Then the Bureau knocked off one, and for some reason, and now it's down to 2. When you think of how many unsolved murders there are, see, we have 17,000 law enforcement agencies in the country, and they don't all talk to each other. They're not all trained the same way. You have that as an issue. So you have an abduction in Virginia, and the person takes the victim over, say, to Tennessee somewhere. That guy's gone to multiple jurisdictions. Are they communicating? Are they talking with each other? So we have that. So we have a clearance rate. The chance of getting away with murder, you have about a 40%, in some cities, greater chance of getting away with murder. And then you have over 40,000 at any given time unidentified dead in morgues in the country. Mm-hmm. And after a period of time, then, if they can't come up with an ID, they will then cremate or bury these victims to make room for the other unsolved cases that are coming in. And so you give me any city that has from street people to women, they're called sex workers now. You have runaways. These are easy pickings for someone who's so inclined to perpetrate a serial whatever, rape, murder, whatever.
Wow. It's just, I've always disliked covering serial killers. That's always been, while you're fascinated on one side, I personally, it just creeps me out. I'm able to handle a lot of things. I've been doing this a long time, but there's just something about serial killer cases that really undo me. And I think the thing about a serial killer is I can't figure them out, their brains. Like other murderers, you may not obviously ever agree with their rationale, but they have one, right? And there is a purpose usually, or sometimes it's a random killing and it's an overreaction. A serial killer, there's a level of, for me, it's evil, but I know that there's something in the brain. And that is the part I can't stand.
Yeah, it's always like a nature and nurture type of question. And what we use an analogy as a weapon is that the DNA points the gun, but it's the personal life experiences of that individual that decide whether or not they squeeze the trigger. And there are different kinds of serial killers. They're not all, and a lot of times the media kind of generalize it, but there are different types. But one of the major things is these are crimes of anger and power. Sex, it could be a sexual component, but it's really secondary. It's really they're playing God, many of them. One of the worst serial killers I talked to was a guy named Bittaker in California who died recently, and he would torture his victims with another guy. And their fantasy while they were incarcerated in California system was to rape a teenager for every year of a teenager's life. And so after they rehabilitated them, let them out of prison, they get a murder mac. They called it a murder mac, a van. They insulated the interior of the van because once they get the victim inside, no one can hear the screams and yells. And what was nauseating when I interviewed, to me, because when I'm looking at the killer, I'm thinking this is what the victim was looking at. but was nauseating. And I made Scott Glenn listen to this one. They made the movie Silence of the Lambs, and he was portraying me very loosely, portraying me. But I made him listen to the tapes. They made audio tapes of the torturing of these victims. And then these two guys would sit around afterwards, having a drink in their lazy boy, and reliving the crime, but like humorous. And so I brought a woman agent with me when we did the interview. And it was interesting because she would ask a question and he would never really look at her. She would ask a very good question. And kept soft spoken. He would always look at, never, he would destroy her in a second. And the only time he felt anything is we brought something up about his family, early childhood. And it's always that you do find it in the backgrounds with this dysfunction in the backgrounds of them. But it's not to say someone who comes from a dysfunctional family is going to grow up to be a violent anything. But of the ones we've interviewed, we certainly have seen that in early childhood things such as animal cruelty, which is a big one. That's a precursor that we track.
I covered this case of a serial killer for Crime Watch Daily out of Baton Rouge. And this was after, he'd been arrested. He always preyed on women who were sex workers. And then he would throw them in the back of the car. He would chop them up. He would then pose them in garbage dumps. And he did this while his live-in girlfriend was at work. So he would drive her to work and then start his thing. And then he would bring the bodies home, chop them up or wash them up or do what he needed to do in the kitchen. And this woman, his ex-girlfriend, still lived in that house, still had the car in which he drove the bodies in. And, I went into the bathroom, okay, and because I had to go. And I swear to you, John, I'm in the bathroom and all of a sudden I have this feeling, this overwhelming, there was nothing wrong with the bathroom other than I was overwhelmed by a feeling. I come out, I finish the interview. We did it in the kitchen where the man chopped the bodies. Okay. So already I'm disgusted by this whole thing. And then, I go to talk to the cops afterwards and then they tell me, and I didn't know this at the time. I swear I didn't know this, that one of the things that he admitted to doing was he cut off the hands of one of his victims and he took it into the bathroom and he was playing with the hands in the bathroom while his girlfriend was outside and she didn't know that he had stashed the hands in there. And then when I heard that from the cops, I'm like, oh my God, that is why I had such an overwhelming feeling in the bathroom where that happened. So the serial killer was Sean Vincent Gillis. I don't know if you ever worked with him. I didn't know that. I've
heard the name, but I've never looked into that case. So,
okay. And John, here's how they got Sean Vincent Gillis. So there were tire marks over by the trash dumps where he left the bodies. And so they figured out how many of these tires were in the greater Baton Rouge area. And then they went to all of the tire stores. And then they got a list of all the people who had bought this particular tire. And then the task force literally went knocking at every door of everyone who's ever bought one of these tires. You're going to love this, John. So the cops knocking on the door, the man who answers the door, it's too much. He's got a Star Trek belt on. Okay. You would have profiled that one, right? It's obviously.
Yeah.
And so he says, hi, do you own this kind of a tire? And he says, oh, yeah, I knew one of the victims. And so the FBI is like, oh my God, the man owns the tires. He's got a Star Trek belt on. And he says he knows one of the victims and volunteers this. So they asked everyone for a volunteer DNA swab. And so he voluntarily does the swab. And the cops, they go back to the task force. They surround the entire neighborhood because they don't want this guy getting out, but they can't arrest him. They rush the DNA swab, but because they're afraid he's going to go out and kill again. The DNA results come in as fast as humanly possible, and they arrest him on the spot and take him in. And then he confesses to this and all these other murders. But it was
great
just
police work.
Oh, isn't that? That was exactly how they did it. Knocking on doors, following the tires.
Yeah. That's a very good department. Yeah, I've done some cases down there. They've had their share of serial killers, like you mentioned, Todd. He's He's one of them. Nathaniel Code was when I was involved with Code, CODE. But the interviews. That's how you learn. That's why I started doing the interviews. When I came back to Quantico, I was recruited very young, 25. I was in grad school, just came out of the military, and went back to first to training, then first to Detroit, then Milwaukee, and I'm working in violent crime out in the field. But when I became back as an instructor, I'm only 31, just turned 32. I'm one of the youngest, not only at Quantico, but one of the youngest of all of headquarters, which has over 1,000 agents there. But I'm hearing the senior agents tell these war stories about these cases, and they're being challenged in the classroom. They don't have their facts correct because there's a cop in the class who worked the case. So how can I accelerate my learning? And I just wanted to be a good instructor. So let's go. We're out on the road 2 weeks at a time teaching police. Let's go into these prisons and see if these guys will talk to us. And sure enough, they did. And then the Bureau finds out about it and they go crazy. What the hell are you doing going into prisons? What does that have to do with anything? Well, it has a lot to do with everything because we're applying it back here. And then Dr. Ann Burgess came on the scene. She was done, have her as a guest sometime, and she had a book that came out just recently too, and it was a forensic nurse, and she did heart attack studies up in Boston and predicting what men would have heart attacks. They looked like 25,000 men were in the sample, and then she heard what we're doing. She was down there to work with an agent in the area of rape and rape typology, and then she saw what we were doing and then sat in on us and said, you guys have to professionalize it. We have to develop an instrument that you use for your interviews. And that's how it started. And we had 36 initially, 36 interviews that we did. But it was a type of thing, Anna, that I learned, unlike those of your fans who may have looked at the Mindhunter TV series. I only used a tape recorder one time, and that was with Edmund Kemper, because you're dealing with very paranoid individuals in prison. They don't trust anyone. Who's going to be listening to this tape? Who are you giving this thing to? Or if you're taking notes, no good. You can't take. What are you writing down? Who's going to see this stuff? So you have to go in there and memorize. You have to know the case backwards and forwards.
That's a lot of work.
A lot. And then after you leave, the first thing you do when you go back to your motel, then you fill out. You have a lot of it filled out beforehand, prior the victimology, police reports, but you want questions from him. Mm-hmm. And there's always a question, a primary question you want to ask, like the BTK strangler. Why did you stop killing? That's what I wanted to know.
Wow, John, this has just been an amazing convection. I would love to just sit here and talk to you for hours.
I wrapped up. I saw go in me.
Oh, I think it's magnificent. So John, we want to remind everyone that your new book is When a Killer Calls. I presume you can get this book wherever you buy books.
Oh yeah, sure. It's all over all over the place.
Oh, it's wonderful. Thank you for sharing this. If anyone wants to follow you, I mean, obviously they can just get all your books and there are a lot of them. Do you have a social media presence by any chance?
Yeah, we have but we haven't been keeping up, with that. I just did a show for Fox Nation, aired in October, if they're interested. And it's five killers that I was involved with in the investigations, and it's on Fox Nation. And what's interesting is I haven't seen anything like it. I am there, and they got actors that are really looks like David Berkowitz, the son of Samuel. But I'm with them. I am with them when Berkowitz is out. I'm giving a narration as to the motivation. What's the purpose behind all that? Mm-hmm. So that is out, and then YouTube. They can find you on YouTube and the interview we're doing here, and I did some other stuff. And there's a bunch of things. Yeah,
it's amazing. I have so enjoyed my conversation with you. I have a million more questions for you.
Well, come on again sometime.
I would love that. I would thoroughly enjoy that, John. You can find me on all social media at Anna G News. You can find more episodes of My Favorite Case, plus our weekly podcast, True Crime Daily, wherever you get your podcasts. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and to our newsletter at truecrimedaily.com. This has been an amazing episode of My Favorite Case. I'm your host, Ana Garcia. Thank you so much for joining us.